Hello and welcome to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke, an ongoing conversation about the root causes of our thinking, where we make connections that engage honestly with a hostile culture. Today, we're going to discuss the symptoms of brainwashing, abortion as a sacrament of the left, and maybe renewing the patriarchy. I'm going to start with that question. Okay, so I'm hearing...
That's loaded.
It's a loaded term, for sure. And I know there's a lot of conservative men in particular, commentators, or just people on the internet who, in response to feminism, are getting more aggressive
Andrew
about
Tate?
Christian...
Oh,
no, I'm talking
not
about Christians.
Christian. Gotcha.
Yeah, about Christian teaching on men leading the household and
Okay.
society.
Yeah.
So it started out as a joke. I remember first hearing it Ann Coulter saying we should repeal the 19th Amendment. That's the real problem with America,
Oh my
right?
goodness,
Women
did
shouldn't
she
be able
say
to
that?
vote. That's what's
Holy
causing all our
cow.
problems. And then I've heard it echoed. That was several years ago. So part of me, then I see people arguing between complementarianism
Yeah.
in Christian teachings about marriage
Yeah.
and patriarchy.
Yeah.
And the best I can see these patriarchy guys and why they're criticizing complementarianism is they feel like it's because I can't see a distinction that's significant. It's almost like the only difference between the two that I can find is tone. That the complementarians are sort of apologetically saying men should lead, but being really careful about how they phrase everything. And the patriarchy guys are just saying, no, we're in charge. Do you see a bigger distinction than that in your experience?
Yes.
All right, tell me more. Tell me more.
We might not be on the same page on this one.
I don't think, okay.
Yes, I do not think patriarchy is good, and here's the reason why.
Okay.
Patri meaning father, and archy is the Greek word for rule.
Yeah.
And I think that's a distortion of the biblical narrative. I don't believe men are to rule. I think when you look at the creation mandate, it is men and women together who are given dominion and rulership over the world. Now, I think there is a stewardship unique to men, and I think there is a calling unique to women as well. Call it a stewardship, that's fine. They have emphasis, and I do think that men are to steward the relationship within the two. There is a stewardship they hold, but it is not rule. I do not believe it is rule. And so you could get into the definitions of headship, and that would be a whole nother branch of this conversation. But I actually don't think it's a good term. I don't think it's a biblical term. I think it's a term that reflects the fallen nature of what God originally did. That the part of the curse is that dominion is going to come in between the two of you, and this is going to be unhealthy for both of you. I believe that when he says to Eve, your desire shall be for your husband, I don't think that's the good desire. I think that's the bad desire, to usurp the stewardship given him to lead between the two of them. But he will, and then rule over you. That's patriarchy. He will rule, and that is a part of the fallen, cursed world. Not a good thing. So
Okay.
I think complementarianism seeks to walk a more razor's edge of the truth of trying to say there is an equality of calling, and there is a stewardship of roles that are different. And the man does have a leadership role that is not the woman's, and she has a different role that they both reflect. And this gets all the way back into our conversations months ago about the different kinds of glory that man have and woman have. They each have a glory that reflects God, but they're different.
So when Jesus talks about leadership in his kingdom, he's specific about that word ruling, that in the world, people are ruling over each other.
Yeah.
And that's not how it should be in the kingdom of
Don't
heaven.
do like the Gentiles who, and the word there is Lord. It's not this one, it's a little different.
It's lording
over. But I think it's the same idea the word patriarchy is, obviously there's a historical context of patriarchy and matriarchy as the ones who lead or rule the people, so to speak. And I'm not necessarily quabbling with what has been. What I sense is what we're talking about is what should be.
Yep, right.
And what we aim to get back in the redeemed world to what was pre-fallen, however that's supposed to look. So that in that regards, I don't like... Now, having said that, I am completely on board with there is a severe lack of male leadership.
Okay.
And I think that's a fault. And I actually personally think that it's a part of the fault.
So the patriarchy guys are going to say, the reason there's a lack of male leadership is because we've compromised with the feminists and created this complementarian thing that says we're sorry to be in charge,
Yeah.
but God made
And
us.
so I don't agree with that last part. I think they're right to see that the reason there's a problem is because there has been an abdication of your role to lead
Yeah.
and to lead, let's say, a married couple, to lead your wife, that there is a stewardship you have that when you're doing life together, you do it together, but there's a certain thing that falls on your shoulders that doesn't fall on hers, and that is to care for the two of you. So when I've talked to people in counseling, what I end up saying is that there's 3 responsibilities, and you look at each one. You alone are responsible for this, you say to the woman, you alone. Then you say to the man, you alone are responsible for what you do.
Right.
And then we say, now about the two of you, and then I turn over and say, you're each 100% responsible. Then I say to the man, and you have more.
Okay.
You're going to give an account somehow for the two of you together.
Right.
In a way that is more than the fact that you both have 100% accountability to resolve this. Because in the kingdom of Jesus, it's better to be wronged. Just give up the issue. Let go. And that solves a lot of things. You both have that calling.
Well, it depends
But
the issue.
I know.
If you're giving up
I
the issue
agree.
about who's going to do the dishes,
Yeah.
but you don't give up the issue of who's going to rule, who's
That's-
in charge.
Yeah. And I
Right.
wouldn't use the word rule. And I'm not.
I only use the word rule to say
Yeah.
that there's authority.
I agree.
If you're going to use it to say it implies lording over, then we want to avoid that, right? We want to say, okay, that's the sinful
Yes, and that's the
direction.
dilemma with even the word authority. You saw me pause. I looked up at the corner. That's my nonverbal signal that I would modify that. It is right,
Yeah.
but I would work to make it not lording over or ruling.
Well,
So what is it?
yeah, and I agree with that too. Men's fault when it gets too masculine, I don't think that's the right word, but when men get overbearing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They want to dominate.
Yes.
When women get overbearing, they want to manipulate.
It's the
In
different
a general
pathway
sense,
to dominate.
right? There's a physical threat of
right.
violence that
That's
men
right.
carry.
That's right. The strength.
And you can almost universalize it. I mean,
agree.
I remember saying, somebody was like making the point, well, some women can out bench press men.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if a woman can out bench press her own husband,
Yeah.
even those really strong women want a husband that's even stronger.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know what I mean?
You notice there are occasions, I was talking to my wife about this, and she gets irritated that I even think about these things, right? But height, a 6'2" woman
Right.
very rarely marries a 5'8" man. It happens very rarely. She finds some 6'4" guy.
Yeah,
Right?
of course.
Now take a man. He doesn't necessarily.
So
it-
wait, whose choice does that tend to be, do you think? I mean, we're kind of making a guess at things here, but
I don't know. They probably both have an interest in it.
yeah, maybe.
But I think probably hers.
I think
she's
probably
making.
hers too. I
And
think
so here's the thing: you can see. So my mother-in-law is 5'0" nothing,
Right.
and her husband, she was 5'2" at one point, right? But her husband is I don't know, is he 6'2" or 6'3" maybe?
Okay.
Right. So you see that. That's not an uncommon thing, but you almost never see the opposite.
Correct.
A 5'6" man marrying a 5'10" woman. Very rare.
And that's the protector role too.
And so the great question there is, when you say who's leading that, I think nature pushes us in certain realms that women in general, that this element of protection, and I don't want to get too far afield on this because we start getting into things that we need to be careful at how we say them to say them well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always trying.
Yes.
But
But this is a big subject.
it is a big subject. It is definitely what the driving force of, I think, the culture war that we're in.
The driving force?
Yeah, is patriarchy versus
Really
matriarchy.
interesting.
I think the battle of the sexes is the culture war. And because Christians haven't gotten it squared away, we haven't been able to lead the culture. And
So you would say that more than race, for example.
100%. Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
That's interesting.
I think
I had not thought of that.
I think feminism, and that's why you see, and we'll get into the abortion debate later, but I think that's why you see abortion being so central, because it's an aspect of the battle of the sexes.
And then if that's the case, I'm going to have to think about that. Would you be saying then that racism, while a separate evil, so to speak, it's caught up as an illustration of injustice?
So what I see
feminine
is,
mindset.
and we're getting big picture here,
Yes, we are.
what I see is that the left represents when we were talking about men being overbearing or women being overbearing, I think the psyche of the left is an overbearing mother, and they see Black people, Hispanic people, people who might be less fortunate on average in culture. They see them as children who they will protect and nurture.
That's right.
It's still, I think the race conversations in America are still a battle of the sexes.
At least at this point. And
Which is why you can't solve them.
Yeah.
If that's what it's about, you're not finding solutions.
We're far afield of our quick question here, but I got to ask one more on this. That's an interesting point. I kind of like what you're saying right now. I'm going to have to think about that. That's very intriguing. For another conversation, I'm reading a fantastic, very interesting book right now on gender from a Christian lady, and I plan to have a long conversation about it in our podcast. I want to read it first and think through it, but it's been very stimulating and very, very good thoughts. But let me ask this question: Obama.
Yeah.
How do you tie it? Because I think he has and we've talked about this. Hate. Dennis Prager just came out with an article yesterday that he hates Israel. He's just been hiding it. He's hated Israel all along.
Sure.
Which kind of flows with things we've been saying, that there's this hidden quality to Obama, that when he was elected, he presented himself a certain way, and now that he's out, he has a little more freedom in some of his things that he really thinks are visible.
So how does that connect to the battle of the sexes?
Yeah, because...
So Israel and European, culture in general represents fatherhood and patriarchy, I think you could say.
Okay.
In that there's an honor to their culture that's driving towards success. Mm-hmm. And so what the Palestinians represent in this current iteration, what poor Black people in the inner city represent in the last go around, are the poor, unfortunate victims of the evil father. Mm-hmm. And so Obama, as the male feminist, right? So what a male feminist does rather than a male leader is he's going to say, oh, this is where the women are going. I'm going to get out in front of them and say, let's go. So he's not actually leading. He's just pretending. He's just getting out in front of wherever the wind goes. And that's what politicians do all the time.
Yeah.
And it's a weak leadership. What a strong leader will do is say, I see where we need to go, and I'm going to turn the ship.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so what they see is that the losers in life are victims to the successful, right? And so who are the successful in the Middle East? Who is the richest and the most powerful tiny little nation? Israel is. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And do you think, little wrinkles of all of that are Obama? I know his book, Dreams of My Father, but he has a terrible relationship with an absent father. It's a gaping hole.
That book is propaganda.
It is propaganda.
I don't give
it's
any
total propaganda. And then he has, I was going to call it sexual dysphoria, but and I was thinking, why use the word dysphoria and not deviancy? But that's another conversation. But
are you talking about rumors of his escapades with men?
Rumors plus, wow. And but my point was being that he brings to it this animosity, and you're tying it in a sense to feminism, and he has his own dysphoria in those areas, in all of them, sexually, father-wise,
racially.
What
race is he?
Yeah.
Sure.
Interesting.
The other connection I would make, and I don't think we have time, but is this concept of how the Protestant Reformation, which was really made popular by kings who wanted to get divorce, right?
Talking Henry VIII.
But it began this like, if we're going to quit this thing because it's dysfunctional, and I'd be curious to see how much more popular divorce is in Protestant countries than Catholic ones, and does that provide a stability? Does the Catholic faith and its demand to avoid divorce, even if it's in these weird ways of like, we're going to annul something that really can't be annulled, even still, and it kind of connects to our conversation last time about should shameful things be hidden or brought out in the open?
I have been thinking about that. I watched our last episode.
But I think of that in the sense of divorce becoming popular is also this symptom of the battle of the sexes, and it all kind of intertwines. But yeah, that's a bigger topic
for further
maybe
reflection. I want to come back to this: the battle of the sexes, and is that the driving force of our current? That's an interesting point.
Yeah. All right, we're going to talk more about topics like this. If you're enjoying what we're doing, click subscribe and get the next episode sent to you in your phone or your laptop. Or do people listen on iPads? I don't know. All right. Also, leave a comment. We're really interested in reviews and questions. We've been getting a few more of those, mostly on YouTube. And it's fun to interact and maybe bring some of those here. I'd love to do that more.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to talk about abortion.
Okay.
I heard somebody making a claim. Abortion made a big comeback in Ohio in the election this week. Ohio had Agenda 1, I think it's called. It's a referendum, Issue 1, a referendum on making abortion a protected right in their constitution, their state constitution. And it passed easily.
57%.
Yeah. And
so landslide.
So there's a lot of second guessing and backbiting going on among conservatives of, well, we shouldn't have gone for we kind of swung for the fences. And so they swung for them back and got abortion right up till birth. In other states, they've said, oh, let's get to the 6-week ban or the 12-week ban or the 15-week or whatever. I think 90% of abortions happen before the 12th week anyway. So if you do a 15-week ban, you're not really banning any, only the very latest abortions, which are rare. There's a couple of classic arguments I want to maybe go after, but I'm curious what you think. People you're reading and following, are they calling for compromise on abortion? Do the pro-life people need to back off?
Oh, well, that matter, a little different than what I was going to aim at. I did see, who was it? Ann Coulter, speaking of. Did you see?
I'm thinking of her.
So there's been comments and questions about was the rigidity of, it would be Christian pro-life people who want no abortion whatsoever. Has that rigidity compromised the GOP because they can't settle on an issue? It's almost like the House.
I don't know which post you saw of hers. I'm sure she made several. She says pro-lifers are going to wipe out the Republican Party. In addition to losing Ohio Tuesday night, Governor Glenn Youngkin lost big in Virginia because of pro-life zealots. A 15-week abortion limit would have been fine with Virginia voters, but Republicans couldn't promise to stop there without risking a primary challenge from full ban pro-lifers. My number one compromise position still stands. Make abortion illegal only for registered Republicans. And my response was...
She's a provocateur.
Oh, no, of course she is. My response to her was, we can make abortions illegal for Republicans if we can make gun ownership illegal for Democrats. And then the total murder difference would probably be... Yeah. The total difference in murders would be about even in the end.
Oh, my goodness.
Because it's like 90% of all murders are committed by Democrats. So let's get those out of there.
So I have seen that. I'm not sure what I think about the argument. I would imagine there's something there. I thought of that, and I wasn't going to bring it up today, but I thought of it in terms of the discussion you and I have had, because you have argued for don't play poker with yourself.
Yeah, don't negotiate with yourself. That's kind of the primary rule of negotiation.
And I hear you say that, and I can see some of it. I'm not sure if I buy it all the way, but I'm not. I don't fall super clearly on one or the other. And when I saw her make those comments, I thought, I can see why she made them. I'm not sure if I can see her point. I'm not sure if I agree entirely. I don't know what I think. I'm probably torn between elements of truthfulness that seem to flow out of both sides of that.
I heard somebody say this week that, well, for one, the activists for Planned Parenthood and their way of thinking, they're not offering any compromises our way, right? They want every abortion legal in every sense, even after birth.
I'd push
so
back
if we're
a teeny
compromising
bit on that.
Well, no. The middle people are willing to compromise, but the activists aren't. The people driving the conversation.
Maybe that's true, and then you would be saying they're not the voices out in the front then.
Well, they're the voices who are twisting the narrative about, oh, that means women with ectopic pregnancies are going to get put in prison.
I know, they say all that.
Yeah, those lies come from the activists.
Right.
Because they're driving.
Maybe you'd make a distinction between the middle people and the activists here, but I think that you do hear the left saying, nobody, and they've said this, nobody wants abortions all the way up. Nobody wants it in the third trimester.
Yeah, they only say that to Republicans who are trying to outlaw it.
That's right. That's right.
And they're liars.
I agree with you.
That's a lie.
But they still say it.
Right.
And so in a sense, getting back to your prior point of if it's underground, that's good. Would you say the logic would hold that if they feel like they have to lie, that's good too?
Well,
because they're feeling the pressure. They know the public doesn't agree with this.
They're manipulating all the time. I don't know if that's, I think it's good to point it out. What I see, though, is the huge tactic. I've been debating abortion since I was in high school with just random people who bring it up. But because people just assume, oh, this is the moral frame, and it's not. But I say that to say
But I didn't
the
follow the
number
last
one
thing.
tactic of an abortion supporter is to say, well, what about these really extreme cases? You know?
Yes.
And so
I agree.
as if, because you're not willing to make the 1%
Yeah.
legal,
Yeah.
we should make it all legal.
I know.
And it's a red herring, and it just
is
goes
a red-
again and again.
I agree with you completely.
And so you just don't take it.
Yeah.
You don't take that conversation.
yeah.
Or I heard a great one. I think it was Kristen Hawkins. She said, if I agree to make abortion legal in the cases of rape, will you agree to make it illegal in every other case? And then the person's like, oh, no.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, well, then
exactly.
let's not talk about
That's a
1% of
good
the
point.
situations.
Yeah. I feel like your quote here, you got a quote here that is in line with what we're talking about, because I want to make a different point on the Ohio abortion thing.
Well,
but before we leave it,
Yeah, so I made a note here of somebody's reply to, I think Allie Beth Stuckey was talking about it, in the sense of like, and really what it comes down to is the non-Christian conservatives, or you could maybe say marginally Christian, versus the born again, this is why we do this, activists.
yeah.
They're turning on pro-life people, as Trump has done, because what a lot of Republicans are saying is Republicans keep losing because of Trump. And so what a lot of the pro-Trump, although Ann Coulter isn't pro-Trump,
Not anymore.
a lot of the pro-Trump people are saying, no, it's the pro-lifers. It's Roe v. Wade that's screwed us all over. And so it's infighting within Republicans, right? But here's the quote I was going to refer to. It says, statements like this, referring to a strong pro-life statement, would carry more weight if conservatives came out with a full-throated, from-the-rooftops plan for universal health care, maternity care, basic income, child care, and comprehensive sex ed. But they won't. They don't actually care about babies and mothers. And I think, okay, so the communists say, if you're not communist, you don't really care about people. Who's that persuading? But it does. There are a lot of Christians who read the statements like that and say, oh, that's a good point. We really have to be more pro-life. And the solution to being pro-life means the government has to take care of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's communism
This
is the
playing
only Christian outcome.
Poker, man.
It's
suggesting we'll give you your points on pro-life if you give us all these other points.
it's a total. It's
But
again.
it is
It's just a lie.
It's a complete lie.
Right. I'd really believe you and care about, listen to you if only you gave me everything I've ever demanded of you and put me in charge of it.
Okay.
Then I'll save the
This
babies.
leads me to my point.
Yeah.
This leads me to my point. Because it is so patently a lie, here's what was shocking to me about the Ohio thing. It wasn't having to do with abortion.
Yeah.
It has to do with this. It was a 57%. It was a landslide. Ohio is solidly red.
Right.
Ohioans, the majority of Ohioans do not agree with what they just voted in. How did this happen? And my agitation is...
You're saying that because Ohio has in recent elections been very Republican.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if you ask the straightforward question, would you like to enshrine the protection? Because there's two things we didn't say. This issue one was not just about abortion. It was about the individual's right to take care of their own health care and body decisions explicitly. And so it extends now to gender issues, and it extends to being a minor. It's called an individual rather than an adult in their majority. So the language is loaded in such a way that this is going to be abortion, is going to be gender, and parents don't have a right. That's what was put in the Constitution, those three things together. And the second emphasis that we didn't mention is by putting in the Constitution, it immediately nullified all prior laws that would have been protecting life at a certain point.
Right.
Because it's now those laws are de facto unconstitutional for Ohio Constitution.
Yeah.
Not only is there an element of brilliance to the move, but there is an element of flat-out corruption that I do not believe the majority of Ohioans believe. But
they made it an either or. Either there's no abortion, or there's every kind of abortion you can imagine.
And they lied, and the money came from other states. It's a complete con job.
Yeah.
And this points to my point of agitation and anger and even prediction. I believe what happened in Ohio is that Ohioans were deceived, and they went along with it. They went along with the deceit.
They wanted to be deceived.
And underneath it is they wanted to be deceived, and we are all back in Romans 1. the degradation of the human heart, suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, and God at some point gives over to foolishness.
Right.
This issue 1, support 57% in Ohio, is foolishness of the highest order. And God, here's what I think. I'm getting angry even as I think about it.
It's worth getting angry about.
Yeah, but it's not even the abortion issue. It's worth getting angry about the murder of little babies. But what makes me angry is it points to how far gone our nation is in its populace. We want to be deceived. We are eager to be deceived. I don't believe if this issue 1 had been put out there, would you like to make constitutional that you can kill a baby right up to the moment it's born, and that parents have no rights over their children, and you can castrate children chemically? Would you like to have that in your Constitution so that no future legislative action or president or governor action can undo it?
Right.
They had said, what the, are you, no.
Right.
Because that would have been straight out there. But when it's presented in the form of a lie and deceit, they chose to go along with it. And I believe they're culpable. Here's where I get in my prediction. I think this is a dire sign for America, that God is giving it warnings. This is going to lead, and it already is leading to tyranny. This is going to lead, this is the pathway to tyranny when people don't care what's being asked of them and they okay it for whatever the reasons may be. It's the easiest path to go down and they vote for it. This brings in tyranny. I think we already see tyranny. And I believe these are God's warning signs of a heavy hand to oppose us as a nation.
So here's my thinking, because the populism that we're experiencing or have been since Trump is kind of a last retreat in some ways to say, oh, the elites have really turned on us, but the people are still together.
That's right.
And if the people now are turning on us, and not us, turning on what's right.
Yes, that's exactly
then not
right.
only, in my mind, not only is tyranny coming, but not only is it deserved, but it would be better. So here's what I mean, that it's better. God brings judgment on his people when they reject him in ways like abortion. Abortion is actually a really big one, in the sense of I'm sacrificing my children so that I can protect my career, so that the harvest will come in. I'll put my baby in the fire to Molech.
Yes, that's exactly right.
It's the exact the same desire.
That's exactly what it is.
And so what we're doing is we're asking God, or we're saying, because God is bringing that judgment of tyranny to say, even tyranny is better than what you've got. You'd be better off in the long term, or the world would be better off if you weren't in charge of yourself anymore. And this is what we, as parents, when our kids are young especially, this is what we do. I'm in tyranny over you. You're my slave, right? There's no difference between a slave and a child, except a child can grow out of it. The child needs a slave master to the degree they can't manage themselves.
So you're not saying it's better in its intrinsic sense. You're saying it's better in terms of it has the more, it goes back to a prior state of being a child. If you're going to act like a child, then you need to be treated like a child in the hopes that you would grow out of it.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I did not think about that. You are right. That's what the law is in the Old Testament.
And so here's my prediction, right? You said we're going to get to predictions. If this continues in the direction it's going, what you'll see is a Christian fascist rise up. And you'll see Christians, maybe me, saying this is better than what we've got. Because it's better than death and race wars and chaos in the streets.
Yeah.
And that's what Spain had when they tried their communist revolution, and they returned back to freedom eventually. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a dark time.
So a similar line to it that I've been thinking about, I just didn't know how committed I was, but this has helped me make another step in the argument, and that is the boycott stuff.
Yeah.
At times I've thought to myself, America, when Nike goes all woke, the reason they can is because you keep buying their products.
Yeah, you don't care.
That's right, you don't care. You'd rather have the shoe than your indignation over the thing that they did. Whatever company, insert issue, insert company. And I thought, you know what? Because the truth of the matter, and it's the same with elections, the truth of the matter is, if they wanted, it is not even a debatable issue. Here's what happens over the last, I don't know how many years, lots of years. A Democrat comes in and they do all these socialist programs, and the economy goes down.
Right.
A Republican comes in, reverses it, gets rid of the tax burden, stops these things, and the economy bursts out. A Democrat comes in and ladens it with all these debts and all these taxes, and the economy sinks. But over and over and over again.
Okay.
They're horrible. People don't care, though. They don't care.
Yeah.
And if they did, they could end it if they wanted to. And so de facto, they don't want to.
Here's the part of it, and this is, I think we might be part of this same problem, is that what conservatives tend to do is argue pros and cons. Let's be rational here, guys. This is the better choice. And what progressives do is they argue a moral, impassioned, you'll be a better person if you vote this way.
Yeah.
And that wins every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, part of, I think, the reason that wins is...
Well, let me take that back. It wins if things are going well.
Yes, out of the prosperity of the prior government,
That's right.
They're able then to say this, and then it destroys everything. I agree with you. And I do also agree that, because one of the things I had on Vivek on Fire here, a comment I was going to make was that at this last debates here, he said some provocative things, and they were excellent. But he said, one of the things he said is prosperity is the root here. We have to get back to prosperity.
Right.
Economic prosperity, put our nation back in line. And Trump has said a similar thing. And I disagreed when Trump said it. I disagreed when Vivek said it.
Right.
It is not economics that underlay our woes. It is spiritual and moral problems.
That's right.
They underlay economics.
Well, and what he's signaling is that old trope of I'm a social liberal and an economic conservative.
Something like that,
And
potentially.
that doesn't sell.
It's wrong, too.
It is,
But you're right, it
saying,
doesn't sell.
It's the same mammon argument.
Yeah.
Saying you want to kill your babies in the fire. I think you shouldn't, because we'll be better off with the babies. It's like that's not
a great point.
It's not a better off argument.
They didn't
It's
stop
a moral
throwing them over the
depravity
cliff.
argument.
Yeah. So, what a depressing. We should have saved this one for last. I'm agitated.
All right. Well, we got to move on.
Yep.
One of the things I want to talk about is that the Trinity School. This is actually part of the Trinity School. This podcast. It's a culture building enterprise that actually is a school, and so we deal with education, influence, industry, and the arts. We're actually working toward developing a system of businesses, like building businesses that we can hand to or train kids to run as they graduate high school. It's kind of a fun idea. If you want to support or just learn more about what's going on at the Trinity School, you can go to gracestaten.com/Trinity School. All right, let's talk about pop culture. Maybe we can slow down a little bit on the doom and gloom.
I'm heated up on the inside.
We got a new Disney movie coming out, The Marvels.
Just came out.
Just came out to
Thursday night open.
Yeah, and predicting it's not going to do well. Big money going into Disney.
Yep.
I
It's on
saw
pace for 40 to 60.
I saw
It's
some
flop
liberals
pace.
celebrating because Disney had good quarterly returns this week, corporate wise, right?
Okay.
Because people are saying they're losing billions upon billions in all these movies.
I
that
saw
are
a
going
total
down.
of 11 billion in the last few years.
Right, and so they've got a lot of other investments,
Yep.
ESPN, Hulu, but they've also got parks and
Yeah.
properties and all this. Okay, there was an interesting thing about the change that's happened in Hollywood and how movies are made in the last couple decades.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been hearing murmurs about it, but I think we're seeing it in stark relief. And that is, it used to be that there was a wide range of budgets that movies were made in, from the low budget $1 million to, of course, these big Marvel movies.
Yeah.
$250 million to make a movie.
Yeah.
In the middle, there were these regular, steady stream of $50 million movies, comedies, romances, just fun dramas, things that were going on,
Not a
mystery
summer
movies.
blockbuster.
And so what people were decrying is that the movie theater business is going down because all those middle budget movies are gone. Because the movie business says, well, if we invest $250 million, we might get $1 billion in return, right?
Yeah.
The original,
Yeah.
there have been several
Yep.
of these superhero
Especially
movies that
with
have brought back
worldwide.
$1 billion
Yeah.
globally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a bigger investment, but a huge return potential.
Yeah.
And then, occasionally we can put in a few pennies onto these $1 to $10 million movies.
Yeah.
And some of them will get big and we might make money.
Yeah.
But as I was reading the fine print, what they all said was the middle budget movies haven't disappeared. They're just not in theaters. They're all on Netflix
Streaming.
and streaming services, right? And I thought, well, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
And if anything, I'd rather watch an 8-episode series on an interesting concept
Yeah.
than a 90-minute, 2-hour movie.
Yeah. And the number of small companies are, I mean, Mark Wahlberg just moved to Nevada, said, I'm done working with the big companies. He's building his own, and that's the kind of movies they're going to aim at. He can have a little more control, but he goes, because part of it, I think, is just raw greed.
I mean, if they don't make money, what's the point? Right?
Yeah, or they're not content if you make a $25 million movie and they're going to make, $25, $30 million on it. When I can make that 25 as a part of this 250 investment and aim for $1 billion.
Right. What's interesting, though, is we don't have any idea what the streaming services are making off of these movies. And I don't know if they do either, because they've got their subscription services and they're just trying to maintain them or grow them.
I don't understand that business model also. I keep seeing articles that the streaming services are losing money.
Yeah, Disney's earnings. I was reading the report this morning.
Peacock, Hulu.
And they said, last year we lost over $1 billion in the streaming. Now we only lost $500 million.
See, I hear that and I think, okay. I have a little bit of doubt about it. Because you know what? A CPA, what is losing can be a wide range.
Yeah, and it's all about projections in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if we lose or win. It's just did we lose more or less
I
than we said we would.
I run my own business on something, and I make money at it. But then when I go to do mileage and write-offs, and I can almost create a financial loss on paper.
Hollywood's famous for that.
Yeah.
When they want to screw over an actor, especially someone who doesn't know or doesn't have a strong representation, they'll say, we'll give you this percentage of the total profits from the movie.
Yeah.
But they design movie businesses to break exactly even.
Yeah.
Right? But with all the write-offs and all the buyouts.
Yeah.
All right, so any thoughts or predictions on what's going to happen with superhero movie genre, assuming this new one's going to flop again?
It seems like the genre has gotten tired.
It's played itself out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So
does the Lord of the Rings to Game of Thrones to the Lord of the Rings genre feels like it's going down the same road?
Yeah, but I think for different reasons. I think it's because everything is woke. So the Wheel of Time series, which probably means nothing to you.
Well, we talked about it a couple episodes back.
Okay, yeah. 14 volume. I've read it more than once. Mm-hmm. So excited, and it was trash. Yeah. Absolute woke trash. Yep. And I didn't watch I watched one episode and like 3 minutes into the second, and I've never watched it, and I have zero interest. The Lord of the Rings one that came out with the Time of Sauron, the pre, I didn't even watch. When I saw that it was going to be woke, I had 0 minutes into it and zero intention of putting any into it. So I think that's the bigger issue there. Whereas in the superhero, I think you have that with the Marvel stuff, for example, and there's woke stuff that has come into those. Mm-hmm. But I also think there's tiredness. They had a phenomenal run.
They did.
Phenomenal run.
Yeah, and it definitely peaked at the right time.
And I think it's okay that something speaks to a population for a season and then it doesn't. I think that's an okay thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think the same about fantasy. I think it would always have an appeal. Not that there couldn't be high moments, but I think it's other issues.
So when you decry the woke stuff, what you're saying is they're rejecting quality storytelling because part of what you see in the woke stuff, right? In a general adventure story of any kind, you're going to have a character growing and learning and overcoming odds that maybe they didn't think they could do. Mm-hmm. Whereas in a woke show, especially, you're going to have a person of color, especially a woman. There's nothing wrong with her. There's nothing she needs to improve. She's perfect the way she is. It's just she has to overcome the opposition.
I would even, to piggyback on the way you said it, I would say this. A woke story is not a story. It's a sermon. Yeah,
but so part of that, though, is a lot of fantasy stories, or a lot of stories in general, but they do portray and are written by, like, what am I thinking of? There was a series of stories that my sons were talking about, like, the author is a Mormon, and the whole story is
Brandon Sanderson.
Is playing out the story of the Mormon faith. It's just like an allegory in the future or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think, well, that's a predetermined, that's not true creativity where you go where the story leads. Mm-hmm. It's just that it's not genuinely Christian, good versus evil, and therefore we sort of don't feel like it has enough complexity or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm still on my first thought on that. I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah.
All right, we wanted to talk about, well, actually, before I jump in, we did say that we were going to say about abortion as a sacrament of the left. And there's a concept to that I want to make sure we
didn't touch on.
And that is that the phrase in the sacraments, the Eucharist in Catholic Church or the communion is that Jesus says of the bread and the wine, this is my body,
Okay.
which is sacrificed for you.
Okay.
And the parallel with abortion is, this is my body, and so therefore I will sacrifice this baby for myself. And it's a perfectly evil inversion
That's true.
of the sacrificial love Jesus demonstrates.
Yeah.
But instead says, I'm going to sacrifice this life so that I can have what I want, the
Yeah.
comforts, the future, the
Yeah.
ambitions, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It's a
I think
dark.
that's a good point. And I think what it gets to is these decisions. We think even as Christians that man is, here's what we really think. We just don't say it. That man is good. And they're fighting a fight against evil. And they get thrown down here and there. But if they just work hard and think really hard and they do all these things, that they'll make the best choice.
Is this like the I'm doing my best concept?
I think it is tied with several
You're not
strands.
doing your best.
Nobody
And
is.
neither am I.
And here's the thing, like the voting.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. The fallen heart loves death.
Oh, tell me about that.
It doesn't always get to that degree, but the reason we abort, the reason children are thrown off, we love violence. This goes all the way back to, I think that the whole point of Genesis 6, its whole thing about the sons of God and the daughters of men is a side story. It's interesting, but the main point is it was violent and every thought was violent. Here's the degree to which mankind had degraded itself.
Yeah.
And with the help of spiritual beings as well. They're a part of that process. But the point is, it's destructive. This is the end result of this sin choice.
Yeah.
And this is the cancer that has infected humanity. This is the leprosy that is covered and seen under. If you take the clothes off, here's the rot.
So in the days of Noah, they were always doing evil all the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what's in our hearts. And we think as if, no, that's just what's chosen in the worst of moments. Now, that's true too, but the truth is, I think we have a propensity towards darkness, and in particular towards death and violence,
Yeah.
towards killing.
Yeah, and we say it's to defend ourselves, but really it's
So I'm reading a
death of convenience. It's
I'm
death
reading a book which we'll mention later, but a history, and what was striking me about it is, though after Jesus comes, the brutality of war ends, but war does not end at all. The Christian world and the Christian Europe and the wars keep going and going and going. We love war.
Yeah.
And anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, sacrament, it is. We love it.
All right. So let's talk about brainwashing.
Brainwashing,
This
go.
is a word we've been using the last
Yes.
couple episodes.
Yeah.
I decided to post it up on social media asking what are the terms that when you hear them, it signals to you that someone is brainwashed when they're saying these words, which is not the same as saying what are the words the woke uses all the time. Like all these words that are going to come up.
Yeah.
I hear them in trainings. I've heard them by people pundits
Yeah.
on the news and all that. But rather, when you hear someone, a normal person that you know at work or a friend on the street who uses these terms, you immediately think, oh, they're brainwashed. Okay? So it's quite a long list, right? And
This is what the long list came from people
it
who
came
responded.
from a bunch of responses, right? Okay, so I thought I have a couple questions. One is maybe we can go through this list and say a few that signal and what you think of them.
Okay.
And then the other question is, someone posted to me, a liberal friend of mine, what are the signals on the right? Someone's been brainwashed in Christendom or by the GOP, right? So we can come to that too. All right, so first one, empathy. Yes or no? Brainwashed or not?
Okay, wait a sec. I have to make a distinction, and then I'll answer it in your terms. But I would do different terms. When you said mindless,
Yes.
I don't agree with that. I agree with
Wait, you think mindless and brainwashing are different?
No. I think that emptied of content is not the same as mindless. So, like empathy, I think it's a great word.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it hasn't been emptied of content and taken over and used it's been weaponized.
Right.
So the DOJ is an excellent branch. It's been weaponized.
Yeah.
The IRS, even though, there's some point in which to collect taxes by government is legitimate, but it's been weaponized.
Yeah, that's what all these words are not saying.
All these words. So mindless doesn't mean they have no meaning, but we're now saying have they been emptied of their original thing and been weaponized in such a way? And then the question is, has the original lost it altogether? And some of it I think they have, but in some not. So empathy, I don't think it's lost it. though I think it's been weaponized.
Okay. I mean, that's what we're
hear
saying,
it with
right?
a filter. So when somebody says it, I'm not sure which. I want to know which one they're doing.
So
is
you're
it the stupid one?
So maybe that's what we could say is on these words, when you hear someone use this word, is it a red flag? Is it a yellow flag?
Yeah.
Or is it a
Good way
green
to put
flag?
it.
Right.
So on empathy, it's yellow flag for me. I'm
Okay.
going to wait to hear more.
I'm
Because
gonna
empathy is good, I think.
For me, I'm going to say it's a red flag.
Yeah.
If someone's prioritizing empathy in life generally, what it tells me is they don't have a compass. It's about feelings.
Yeah. See, I don't see it that way. So empathy, I think, is one of my biggest strengths.
All right. How about inclusion?
Inclusion, it's almost all the way to red. It has a teeny hint of yellow in it, but it's mostly red now.
So here was the thing on inclusion that
I would say probably red.
probably
just gotta
red.
give
It dawned on me with the word inclusion
It's
is
sad.
that it's always used to refer to someone whose life doesn't fit the Christian narrative.
Yep, that's right.
Like,
Deviance.
oh, well, what if someone is gay? What if someone's parents are divorced? And you're going to make Christmas about mom? You know, you're going to have, every Father's Day, someone says, why can't it just be Parents' Day?
Yep.
So
Did you
nobody
skip
wants to be inclusive about Christianity.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know what I'm saying? No one wants to make sure the Christian kids feel included.
Christianity is not inclusive. It's actually exclusive.
Well, all religions are exclusive. That's the point. Because you have to commit to a belief, and that excludes other beliefs.
Yeah.
It's like saying discrimination is bad. No, discrimination is saying this one is better. I like this. I don't like that. We do that all the time. You choose what shirt you're going to put on.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
Go.
Equity.
In today, we have so past yellow, but I still like the equitable as a adjective. But if it's equity, it's now
That is
the
interesting.
suspect.
Equitable still holds a little bit of its original meaning.
It's a
because
good
it's
word.
complicated, the word.
Yeah.
Versus,
But if we're just equity, it's almost all the way to red again.
and equity, I think, is a distinct word that
Unless it's a financial form.
deliberately changed the definition of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because equity is in the Bible, but it means equality and justice.
Equality of opportunity
Not-
versus equality of result.
Right. And oppressive, deliberate discrimination in the service of an agenda. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Spaces. So either safe spaces or making space for brown voices, that kind of thing.
Well, if it's in those contexts, those are all red.
Yeah.
But I would say this is somewhere in between yellow and red, an orangey. Because I do think I use it when I talk to people. It's a goal to make space. No, I don't use safe space.
Make space.
But I want to, so I would use it in our podcasting.
Yeah.
When I self-talk, it's too easy to say I have my points I want to make. And so let's say the Christian nationalism conversation we've been having, right, which has these underlying elements that we differ. I purposely try to make space as we talk so that I'm not just looking at my next point, but I'm actually letting it sit over there. There's space. I'll get to it, but I want to hear you and give a moment to reflect on what you said, because I don't want to respond to what I think you mean. I really want to respond to what you actually mean.
Right.
And that, to me, I use the idea of giving space as I listen to
So
you.
you still use that word?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just say make room.
Yeah. Well, I do make room too.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. My truth. I think we're clear on that
My
one.
truth is as red as it can get.
Yeah.
100%.
A couple of them that are.
But here's the thing with my truth. There is no such thing. It is an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Truth is not individualized. There are components of it that is, but truth is in general, I believe,
I think
in
of
a
this as like
meta-narrative.
equity in that it is a word they've actually tried to take it and redefine it. Okay, more ones that are common. Fascists.
It's almost like these are words lost to our vocabulary because of the weaponization, is the question.
It really is.
Is
yeah.
it been lost? Is it lost for good?
Well,
What
I think of them is that they're words that have been given a narrative of their own with moral weight. And if you reject the narrative, how can you even use the word?
Yes,
It
I
puts you
agree.
in a bind.
Now, fascist, you said fascist, right? So I don't think that one is lost. I think because I think it is still a word up for grabs. Now, the left
interesting.
uses it a lot, but I think they're right. We've used it. We have tried to say
But it's almost always in counterattack, isn't it? Like, no, you're fascist, right?
Well, that's true. We've tried to get at what it is a long time ago when we had that difficult conversation with the screenshot. But yeah, to me, it's still up for grabs.
Okay. What about hate speech?
hate speech is lost, but I want to bring it.
But
I
was
want
it
to
ever
bring it
found?
back. I don't know. Maybe not.
Because I feel like
No.
that one is a uniquely invented term.
No, in fact, whenever we get to the other thing I want to say on free speech, I want to bring that up again, hate speech.
Okay, well, let's talk about free speech. I don't think
You
we
don't
need to
want
go
to do
through
any of
every...
these other words
I mean,
here?
there's so many. Is there one you want to
Well,
bring up?
triggered.
Ooh, triggered. Okay. I put that as red.
I think it's lost mostly also, which is to me sad, but I still use it because in counseling, we talked last time about idolatry.
Yeah.
And idolatry being the issue is about disproportionate responses.
Okay.
One of the ways you discover, and in counseling you work with people to discover disproportionate responses, is look at the response and then when did it come about? What triggered it?
So an unexpected emotional reaction.
A triggering is a good word for something happened and I didn't realize it, and you got to go back and find it.
There's actually research among psychologists around trigger warnings, and that they're actually very negative overall, like long-term impact. Because what you're doing is you're priming someone who feels like they're victimized to be ever vigilant. And so you're creating a high-stress situation
I can see that.
in the long term makes the reactions
Yeah.
more intense.
Yeah.
Are any others in that list you see that you want to jump on?
No. I mean, all of them, I'm just trying to make a point with all of them. I think we did a good job.
All right, well, so talk to me about free speech.
Okay. So here's what I want to ask. I have a question. We said something the last time we were together. I listened back through, I thought back through, and I don't agree with what I said.
Oh, okay.
And I think you said it too, but you have the right to still say what you said. But I think don't agree. What we made the statement was, what is free speech? Now, we recognize that there's a continuum. You can't say fire in a theater. You can't yell fire. It's illegal.
Unless there's an actual fire.
Unless there's actual fire.
Right.
Because it's been done, there's stampede, people lost life. It's now, so in one sense, we recognize free speech is not strictly speaking 100% absolute.
Yeah.
It does have limitations to it. We recognize that, good thing. But then we were talking last time about when should it be you can't do it. And we talked about hate speech. We talked about racism here's the examples I had in my thing. The word yelling fire on the continuum. I went back to the NWA, F the police, because they were told, you can't say this. And they said, we have the right to say whatever we want in their songs. And they actually prevailed in the general public, even with people who didn't like what they're saying, but they have a right to say it.
Well, the Supreme Court has sided with that.
That's right.
Repeatedly.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Okay, so what we said last time we were together is that should be illegal to say. You should, and so Rashid,
to the degree that it's a call for genocide.
because implicit in it is a call for genocide. Now, there's a little bit of waffling, and so we'll put it at a 90-10 split.
Yep.
That there can be a 10%. They don't know what it means, and it just means we should have coast to coast.
Or they think, oh, freedom. Yeah, I want that.
Yeah.
Right.
But everyone recognized 90%. It implies the genocide of Israel. Right. And then the other one I put up because I needed to keep the linguistics here. Fry Ted Bundy. Right. We've got a mass murderer.
Okay.
And the sentiment, he should die.
Yeah.
And saying that publicly. So here's the question. Here's what I'd like to propose an alternate idea.
Was this the thing when Ted Bundy was about to be executed? That people were excitedly saying?
But yeah, people called for his execution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tried to think of something that was more recent, and I just couldn't think of it. I gave up, and I just wanted to get an illustration out there. Because I think, here's the point I want to make. I said last time that it should be illegal to do hate speech or from the river to the sea that calls for genocide.
Right.
And putting it in the category of yelling fire in a theater. As I've reflected on it, I'm not sure that's accurate. I'm thinking that freedom of speech means you should be able to say anything. You should be able to you have a right to hold an obnoxious opinion. Okay? To be racist.
Yeah.
You have a right to have a racist opinion, to believe that the Jews are inferior human beings from their forefather Adam through Lilith. They are not real. That's a view.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
There's a view that was held in the South that black people they're closer to the apes.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a disgusting view. Both of those are.
Sure.
But you have a liberty as an individual to hold them. I can't control your mind. And so The next question is, do you have a liberty to say them?
Yeah.
And then do you have a liberty to say them to the degree that you call for the death of somebody? And I actually, as I've been thinking about it, I want to test this idea out with the answer, yes. You should have the liberty to say it. So,
all right, so here's an example, and maybe we can draw a distinction. If you're calling for the execution of a criminal, right?
Okay.
I've called for the arrest, and I don't know if I've publicly said it, but I would definitely be in favor of the arrest and execution of Fauci.
Okay, I was just going to say
for
Biden.
Overseeing.
So for treasonous things, our country has said you should.
Right.
You know,
but what I'm not calling for is somebody go assassinate that guy.
Do
you know what I'm saying?
I do.
And so when you're inciting violence versus a crime, I think there's a distinction that's important.
Wait. Let's use this as an example then.
Okay.
Because let's use the Fauci one.
Yeah.
We probably won't get in trouble for this one. Have anybody called for Fauci? Not only should he be hung, but it'd be great if somebody assassinated him. Something tickles my memory that something has been said like that.
I've seen a lot. Well, there was a book came out by Daniel Horowitz and Steve Deace called The Rise of the Fourth Reich. And they go through how corrupt and twisted the whole COVID narrative was. And the cover of that book is a noose.
That they should be hung.
They think those guys, and they always make the little phrase at the end, after a fair trial, of course.
Yes, right.
But what they did was so heinously evil, and to leave it undealt with is to leave that blood guilt on our land.
So let me take a position and see if you differ, and we can bandy it back and forth. Let me take the position. I'm not sure how committed I am to it, but I want to test it out. Free speech, a form of absolutism. They have a right to say that. They don't have a right to say a word like fire that has been shown it creates a mass hysteria and people have died. Okay? If somebody says, we're going to put a person on our couch again. If somebody says that Fauci should be executed,
right?
There is that doesn't come about as a result of his speech. Now, somebody could hear that and think, I'm going to do it. Okay?
Right.
But they are the ones doing it by choice.
But if someone said
in a theater is
if
not
someone
by
said
choice.
Somebody needs to take a gun and go find Fauci, that would be illegal, and it should be.
Okay, so I disagree.
Wait.
If they should find a gun and they should kill, I'm going to say disagree for a minute here.
Okay, all right.
Because they have a freedom to say that. That it doesn't mean that they don't have a freedom to go do it.
Right.
And if somebody else does it, they're not going to be put on trial. It's the person who goes and pulls the trigger. So how is that any different than fry Ted Bundy or F the police or...
Well, the purpose of restraint around free speech is to maintain a peaceful civilization. So the only way you can say, like imagine all the people who've called for us to go to war with Russia.
Okay.
They're calling for death. I mean, you could call for Putin's death.
I was thinking about those kinds of illustrations.
But what you're calling for is for the government of the people and by the people to take a certain action. And the government maintains their monopoly on violence in a civilized society. But so when you call for the end of that monopoly and you say, in fact, let's break down violence into the hands of individual people who seek vengeance for wrongs suffered, there's a disintegration that happens.
Batman?
Yeah.
So Batman should be illegal as a movie.
Well, so Batman represents a culture that's broken down. And when society, when the police can no longer maintain the peace, then, and this is back to that idea of the fascist ruler, right? When society can't maintain justice, can't do what's right, someone has to come and just exert power.
What do you think about Kathy, Griffin, when she holds the severed Trump head? Do you think that should have been illegal?
I think that's on the line for sure.
I don't see how it can be consistent. If your word forces an issue of damage to society, like fire in a theater, I think then the word you should be able to say.
Is it the immediacy that makes you like? Because if someone, if there's an immediate stampede where people die,
the immediacy with its agency. The word in a fire theater takes away the agency, the ability to act of all the moviegoers. They have to get up and flee because there's a fire, apparently.
Okay.
And in that, creating a false story that there's a fire and then getting up to flee, a life can be lost. So you cannot say that when it's false as a joke. That prank is a prank that's illegal, because that's what it is. It's a prank. It's a joke.
Yeah.
That's illegal because it inherently...
Or you could do it as for sinister purposes, right? If you actually just want chaos.
But if you could show that, if you could say that I thought there was a fire, even if you're lying, you would not be held culpable, right? You have to be shown. So the guy who pulls the fire alarm in Congress says, he's being let off with a slap on the wrist, even though he did it to delay a vote. But in a sense, he did that very same thing, but he says, well, I didn't know. I tried this door, da-da-da. And as long as that flimsy excuse can hold up, you're not going to accuse them because you don't know what their thinking was. But my point is...
I'm making a skeptical face for those who are just listening.
Yeah. But my point is that what's wrong with the idea that you can say anything as long as it doesn't compel I suppose, immediacy, like you said, but it doesn't take away the agency. So if I call for the hanging of Fauci, or even, not me, if the person on our couch calls for the death or the hanging of Fauci or his assassination, it's despicable. He should have a trial. That's subverting a trial.
Yeah.
But if somebody else in the other side, across the street heard that, and they said, well, because of that, I went and I shot Fauci, the call for his assassination created no agency in somebody else to do it. They made a choice. Versus a fire, the choice was taken from them.
So that's because there's a crowd and there's chaos and there's that sort of thing. That, to me, that perfectly describes a sea of people chanting from the river to the sea. Because you've got a crowd, it's like
I understand that's a crowd, but that doesn't, okay, so that chant, and that's
that churns up rioting violence. It churns up, and there's been stories of Jewish people being killed in those circumstances.
Yes and no. I understand that dynamic is there, that a riot's happen, right? But only if you choose to be a part of it. You don't, so you were back at, you said things got out of hand in DC in January. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of energy. They have shown that mass hysteria, that there is a crowd component to us that we can get carried along and taken.
Right.
But not to the loss of our faculties. Did you get carried along? I know you didn't, else I wouldn't even ask it online, because you were asked this by professionals or the bureaucracy. But you were able to say, I'm partly carried up with the energy here, but I've restrained myself. I'm not going to go that far.
Yeah.
I'm saying that when they're chanting, every individual has the choice to say, I'm not going to go kill those Israelis.
Right.
That's not the same thing as in a theater. Yell fire. I got to grab my kid and we got to run to the door or we're going to die. My agency is gone. I have to do this.
Oh, I don't agree with that.
Why
I think
not?
because if you're in a theater and someone yells fire, as a responsible adult, the first thing you should ask is there actually a fire? And what exit am I going to go to? And not just scream and run.
Yeah.
You're endangering yourself and others when you let your brain shut off in that environment.
The screaming and running, but if you're in a theater and somebody yells fire, the first thing you're going to do is, especially if you have little kids, but you're going to get up and you're grab them and you're going to head out. Now you might be looking to see if you can see it, but you're not going to stop and assess it. Is this really true? You're going to assume you don't know everything, that there's hallways that you don't see. There could be a balcony. You might not even smell anything, and you might see. And everybody,
I don't agree. I mean, I would think, okay, if I head toward that exit, that might be where the fire is. Like you can't just run off. You have to assess and evaluate and make your decisions along the way. So I think a riot is very similar to a fire in a crowded theater. And I think this history of genocides plays that out, and that most genocides take place over the course of days. And there's someone in media making this call. We've got to do this. We've got to take action.
Well,
that's what happened with the George Floyd riots.
Let's go at it from a different angle. Oh, we're way over our time here.
Yeah.
What about, where does the line then stop between, because you agreed that there is the liberty to hold racist opinions.
Yeah.
To hold, and if you hold a racist opinion, that means they're a subhuman person, right?
Yep.
So wanting their death is not a big step. You can think that, but you're saying that you can't say it.
Well, being a racist and calling for the genocide of a people group are not the same thing, even remotely.
Well, they are
Thinking they're
connected.
inferior to you. Dogs are inferior to me. I don't want to kill them all.
Yeah.
It's just a hierarchical perspective that's
Yeah.
based on poor evidence.
Yeah. Well,
The call
I
for
mean, I
genocide
agree
is
with that.
another level of evil that
Yeah.
is not. I don't think it's comparable at all to racism.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we should come back to it. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't see where. I think what you're saying, the distinction you're trying to make is that there are certain environments where you lose your agency and therefore there's more responsibility for the person who created that environment. Whether
That's
it's
right.
calling for what I see though in my limited experience and some research, that a genocidal fervor or a call for the blood of a certain race and the mindless fear of a crowded theater in the midst of a fire aren't that different.
Well, so then the Supreme Court upholds that NWA can say F the police, and it calls for their deaths in the songs. And they're in a crowded concert with 10,000 people, and they're blasting that, the energy, that's not a crowd, that's not a mass. You don't think that resulted in any, I mean, the George Floyd stuff has resulted, the BLM stuff has resulted in death towards police officers.
Yeah, for sure. So did NWA incite a riot?
That's where we're going to get back to.
If they incited a riot, they should be prosecuted for that. But the phrase...
No, I don't know of any riots that ever came about as a result.
Oh, okay.
But that doesn't mean that it didn't result in harm back from a people who felt they were oppressed by police
Right.
to police because of those lyrics. And yet
Yeah.
the Supreme Court still said they had a right to say that.
Well,
They had a right to say
that
words.
is the freedom of speech, is because what you're saying is whose narrative is right.
Yes, this
And the
what it ends
government
up getting.
doesn't get to choose whose narrative is right. So were the inner city black young men who say the police are oppressing them, that's a story. Is it
So
true
that's
or
what I'm
not? The
getting
government
at.
doesn't get to decide.
The absolutist in me is trying to say when Kathy Griffith holds up Trump's head, everybody thinks it's in poor taste. But conservatives said she has a right to express her opinion for the most part.
But
If
what is that
somebody had
opinion?
held up-
Murder Trump. That's not an opinion.
If somebody had held up Obama's head, they'd be put in jail
Right.
because you're inciting your hate speech.
Well, the reason that
Calling
Kathy
for his assassination.
Griffith gets away with it is not because there's some rule of law, but rather because she's supporting the regime narrative
That's what I'm
that
trying
Trump
to say.
deserves
is
to be
that-
assassinated.
Yes. So what you're saying is that it's just inconsistent. They should have put her in jail.
I think it's on the line. I don't know if I can make
particular
the
one.
call. Yeah.
I mean, a severed head.
I don't have any doubt. I mean, it's pretty blatant, right?
It's
Yeah.
as blatant as from the river to the sea. This is what I wish
Yeah.
for. This
Yeah.
is what should happen. This
I
is
think
what deserves to
no.
happen.
If you said from the river to the sea, we're going to kill every Jew. That's not this right because you're
yeah.
saying we're going to kill Trump when you do that. We want to kill him. Let's kill him.
we want to.
Right.
She's saying she thinks he should
It's a
be
call.
dead.
It's a call to, but it's also a call for his death.
And what about the Hamas? I mean, the whole thing's when they said that Christian nationalists are the equivalent of Hamas. They're more dangerous to our nation than Hamas,
right.
right? And the public call, like in the call to arms,
But those are the same people that say Hamas is actually not that bad.
I know they
So it's
do.
like, oh, maybe they don't think we're that bad.
But the rest of the world recognizes that Hamas should face the consequences of its terrorism.
Right.
And that Israel taking them out, taking their life as a state action is legitimate.
Yeah.
Even if there's questions about how far and how long, etc. That would mean that it would be legitimate to take out Christian nationalists from their point.
That's what they want.
Yeah, that's what they want.
For sure.
So they should be put in jail for that.
No, because they're not yet. They're not calling for either group.
They're as calling for it as from the river to the sea.
No, what they're doing is they're trying to make a moral equivalency.
Right.
Right. So they're saying, as immoral as you are feeling that Hamas is, that's how immoral we think you are.
I don't think they're saying
Christians.
as you feel. They're saying as is.
But what should be illegal and did happen a lot in the last month or so is activists on the left calling for actual genocide. Like, why won't the Christians get treated like the Jews?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is over the line for sure.
Well, where this ends up is the censure on Tlaib. I actually didn't agree with it. I wouldn't have. I think she has a right. I think that you have a right to be disgusting, in your opinion, and even to say I think people should die. You don't have
We're
a
gonna
right
have to agree to disagree on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a pro
Well,
free speech, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think we could get a
I
lot
shouldn't
easier.
say
It'd be interesting to talk about
trying out
banning
the
books.
idea. I'm trying out the idea
Okay.
and seeing how I like it over time.
It'd be
And
interesting to
that's where
talk about banning books and speech in like schools.
Yeah.
I went back and forth a little bit with Scioto public schools because they wouldn't allow kids to wear Trump clothes to school.
Yeah.
And their claim was just, no, we don't allow political stuff. But you could wear a rainbow shirt every day of the week, and
Yeah.
no one's, you're going to get a high five from half the teachers.
That's
So
right.
maybe not half in Scioto,
yeah.
but enough that it matters. All right, well, let's go to the Bible for a little bit here. Can we jump ahead? I want to talk about loving your neighbor. Where does that phrase come from? And you had something about interpreting the Old Testament.
Okay. Here's the point, and I thought it was a clever point, and I actually got it while listening to the Bible Project, and it was just helpful, and so I wanted to throw it out there and see what you thought about it.
Okay.
The idea was this. So I think everybody struggles, all denominations, all theological perspectives wrestle with how to understand the Old Testament. In fact, the early church, the New Testament letters are written. One of the issues that is decades and spans really for a couple hundred years is how do these people that have become Christians, they've been Jews, they've become Christians, and how do they relate to their Old Testament roots? And what about the new people? Do they have to be circumcised? What do they have to follow of Moses, of what God said to do for this people before? And is this a new people, and how different are they? How the same?
Do we have to be Jews in order to follow Jesus?
All of those things and the Old Testament laws. And then it gets complicated by laws that seem very moral, like don't steal. Laws that seem very, in the old distinction has been civil, stone a person if they violate the Sabbath. Laws that seem to be ceremonial, don't make sure you give the heart, well, anyway, all these different kinds of laws. Here's what was proposed, and I thought it was clever, and that is that in the wrestling with it, the idea is that Paul concludes that when Jesus is asked, what's the greatest of commandments? And he says, to love the Lord your God, and the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah. This is the sum of the law.
Right.
So when he says that what Paul does is Paul goes back through and says, okay, when I think about the Old Testament, I don't think if you become a Christian, you have to become an Old Testament Jew. But I still think, I don't throw it out. I still think it applies. But how? I think that there was love at the root of every Old Testament command. I just have to figure out how.
Okay, yeah.
And so when we come to this, and the famous one is, and this is the one they use, and this one I've thought a lot about, when Paul says, people in the church, those who labor in word and doctrine, should be worthy of a double honor. There's the honor of being a leader, and then there's the honor of getting some money for what they do. They're working hard at this. Mm-hmm. And he says, and he quotes Leviticus, an ox, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads the grain.
Yeah.
And so what was suggested is, rather than the idea that Paul found something that nobody had ever thought of before.
We assume, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that he had an apostolic calling that he could go take out of the Old Testament phrases and use them however he wanted.
Okay.
And then we ask, can we do the same thing? Or how would we do what Paul did?
Yeah.
What the presentation is that, what Paul was doing is saying, muzzling the ox, what's the love in it there? What is the love from God? And in that case, what it is this. You're making a profit on grain, and you've got an ox, and you're going to thresh it out, and he's working for you. It's more than you can do. Loving even the ox as an animal said he should get to participate in your profit, in your gain. And that's what loving, and God is saying, this is what loving even to the beast. Mm-hmm. And so when he comes and thinks about pastors laboring, threshing grain for the good of people, Paul argues, look, it's loving that they should get some of the general profit of that whole endeavor together.
Right.
They should get to participate and eat while they're doing it, because that's loving. And I thought, what an interesting idea. Rather than saying there's some apostolic thing that Paul has, or that there is some hidden meaning in certain Old Testament things that nobody ever typologically saw before, he's laboring to uncover what was loving in the strange laws of the Old Testament.
I see. Yeah.
That's cool. There you apply them into whatever context they seem to fit now.
Right.
And I thought, that makes a lot of sense. A
So
lot
then
of
you could
sense.
read almost every law that way.
You could and you should.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
the whole old covenant becomes applicable to you, not in its one-to-one ratios or in a covenantal sense, but the intention of love that was under that Jesus said, love is a fulfillment, is all the law is contained in love. Love God and neighbor. That's
So
all
I'll
the
tell you
laws.
my reaction to that is caution, because and this is a reactionary caution. So it's just reacting to how I see the word love handled by pastors and by Christians who are trying to apply it in ways the Bible doesn't support. Because the world that we live in, our culture, has taken the concept of love from God and twisted it to mean all sorts of things
True.
that God does
Absolutely
not approve
true.
or accept.
Well,
right?
you should read the verses you put down here
Well,
because they make
and
your point.
So, well, I want to make that point first, is that the word love, in used about the nature of God, I would call it a yellow flag, as far as one of those mindless or maybe brainwashed signal words to say, oh, wait a minute, what kind of love are we talking right now? Is it a love that a mother who spoils her child thinks she's showing by helping that child avoid any negative feelings?
Yeah.
When in fact they need negative feelings so they understand that they're not God?
Yeah.
Which is where that's
Yeah,
what our culture is
that's right.
doing, right?
That is true.
Is it love that communist says we need to show by providing for every need of every poor person and create a communist society? Otherwise, we can't protect babies from
Yeah.
being murdered so
Yeah.
that girls can continue their college career.
Yeah.
You know? So that's one.
Yeah.
And the other side of it is the origins of the love your neighbor as yourself is actually really fascinating. It comes from Leviticus 19, and I'll read it to you. It says in that verse 17, do not hate a fellow Israelite in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in their guilt. In other words, how are you going to handle when the person, your neighbor, who you could say, this is not my business, but you're going to resent them when they're sinning, especially against you, right? And not only that, and the Bible's really clear that the sin of your neighbor is partly your business because it becomes the sin of the community. Israel as a nation is judged as a whole. So you can't just take a purely individualistic look at how God is going to treat us. You talked about that earlier. As a father and a husband, God's going to judge you for the authority that you carry into your home. Mm-hmm. And you can say, well, that was my wife did it, God. That's what Adam said in the garden. It was that woman, and it didn't go well for Adam. Mm-hmm. But let's finish this. It says, rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in their guilt. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. So what I read this to mean is part of loving your neighbor is facing sin together and not avoiding conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important way. If you can compare that or bear that in mind as you look at Old Testament laws, what happens is you put upon yourself rightly, I think, some responsibility for your neighbor.
Yeah.
Right? I am my neighbor's keeper.
Yeah.
My brother's my
Yeah.
responsibility.
Put another way, we would need to be careful in utilizing the approach to not think just of benevolent elements of love, but think of its full-throated. It includes even rebuking your neighbor, or when Paul rebukes Peter,
that's
it
right.
was a loving thing.
In public.
In public. It was
Not
a
that you
loving
need to
thing.
always rebuke
Yeah.
your neighbor in public.
Yeah.
There's
that's
a
right.
public sin that needs to be rebuked publicly,
Yeah.
and the more that someone leads publicly, they need to be.
And I have always liked the phrase that I think it's in Galatians, speaking the truth in love. Mm-hmm. To me, that gets these two ideas together, that it is loving to be kind and compassionate, and it is loving to stand and oppose something, or to express something that is going to be uncomfortable and difficult. That is loving.
And I would say to Christians generally, but leaders especially, the world doesn't get to define love.
Yeah, that's right.
And if anyone in your life is saying, if you don't do what I want, you don't love me, that person is manipulating you, and you need to deal with that frankly and forthrightly.
Yeah.
And I think Christians get manipulated in society the same way as every kind of abusive spouse. I think of counseling a girl whose boyfriend threatens suicide if she breaks up with him. It's like, you got to get out of that, and it's not your fault.
That'd be another way to say it. Everyone believes Jesus loved, everyone who has that kind of perspective on Jesus, but then you'd have to start listing examples. He not only loved when he healed here, or he embraced this person there, or those people, but he also loved when he braided the whip for the temple.
Yeah.
He loved when he says, you den of vipers.
That's right.
And when he opposed, and when the rich young ruler came to him and he said, you got to give up everything, and the guy went away, he loved by letting him walk away.
And what I would say to the Bible Project guys is, it's true that you should look at every law and say, how is this expressing love? But I think you also have to look at every law and say, how am I not understanding love if I exclude this law from how I think of love?
Let's say you run into an Old Testament example and you say, I don't see kindness, mercy, compassion, whatever you might be using.
Right.
Well, that means probably you're overlooking some elements of love, and it's going to instruct you.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Now, I don't know if you have a particular reason to say that with Bible Project. You almost talk like you were speaking to him directly.
Well, I mean, I don't know those guys. I've met one of them, but what I would caution for anybody who's trying to be in an apologetic role about Christianity is that they're giving permission for the world's definition of love to define how a Christian should talk or preach or teach the Bible.
Yeah.
That's what I feel.
I agree. That's a misstep. So
I don't know that they're deliberately doing that, but I see it as like a door they opened that they better be careful.
Now, are you in this particular illustration or in other things? Oh,
no,
I don't see it in this particular illustration.
In that phraseology of saying love defines the law.
Well, that was Jesus' words.
I know, but what I'm saying is, and this is what we were talking about earlier about the brainwashing, is the whole goal is to retwist words to mean something new.
To empty them of one set of meanings and invest them with a different.
And
I
so
agree.
Jesus said love, but what was he saying?
That's why I was saying we have to look at all. Jesus' life gives us these illustrations of what love would be, which are incredibly supportive and incredibly stand against as well.
Right.
And it's not a full-throated love if it doesn't include both those aspects. So what it makes me think of as an illustration, Old Testament, talking about oxen and the grain and whatnot. Well, there's another one. If your ox gets loose and it gores your ox or your child or your household member, and if you never knew about it, then there's one set of things to do.
If you didn't know about the risk.
That he'd never, but this ox had done it before and it had been covered up and you knew about it, well then the penalty to you was more severe. And what you have to say, even to putting to death the ox, right?
Yeah.
What you have to say is, that's loving when you kill the animal. The one context was loving, he should participate in the profits. That sounds really, our world would love that part, right?
Yeah, right.
But there's another one that says it's loving to put the animal to death.
So as long as it's reciprocal, that you define the laws by love and you define love by the law, I think you're in a good place.
Yeah.
It just can't be one-sided. Yeah. Awesome. Well, if you've been listening to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke, and if you enjoyed this episode, found something to reconsider, share it with a friend, start a good conversation. And remember to dig a little deeper and think again. We'll see you next time.